after 2008 crash, the Greek economy collapsed, and obviously they no longer had the ability to devalue that currency. That's one of the reasons why they had that convergence criteria. If the countries within a currency union are very different in their economic fortunes, that union is going to have stress. It turned out Greeks were actually lying. They cooked the books so that they could make it to euro. And they got a lot of money from the European Union. They spent all of that money to reduce the retirement age to 50, okay? You know, that's old people vote. That's the same in Greece as it is here. Old people vote. So if you allow them retire at 50, they're gonna vote for you, which they did. But at some point, those chickens came home to roost. They came this close to leaving euro. And basically, France and Germany, they decided, okay, if these guys leave euro, people are going to attack Italian, Spanish, Portuguese. They weren't as weak as Greece, but they were pretty weak. And that means the entire euro is going to collapse. So they said, okay, we're going to go buy Greek government bonds and support them. Let me see if I can find it. I'm going to let you guys read the rest of the chapter, because we're not going to have a homework assignment on that. Let's see. There is a little instrument called credit default swap. It's basically a summary way of pricing the default risk, which we're going to talk about later during the semester in terms of understanding the meaning and valuation of it. Not WAPs, but swaps. Let's see how much they go back. This is measured in basis points. A basis point is 1% of a percent. So if I want protection from Greek government defaulting on its bonds over the next 5 years, if I have 10,000 euro worth of bonds, if I want that protection every year, I'm willing to pay 72 euros. That's the price of insurance against default. That's what a credit default swap is. Let's do all. We don't go that much, but look at it in 2017. 870 basis points. So if you were carrying 10,000 euro worth of Greek bonds and you want to be insured against default over the next 5 years, every year you have to pay 870 euros for that. You can think of credit default swap as kind of the spread. How much interest you need to pay over and above a safe rate, like US Treasuries. And the reason these went down for two things. A, the Greek economy improved relative to 2008. B, France and Germany bought pretty much most of the outstanding Greek bonds. So even if they can't pay, those guys are going to basically roll those bonds over. They have no other choice. By the way, if you're wondering what the credit default swap for US is, it's $20. I would actually make a lot of money. Do you really think the US is going to default on its US dollar denominated loans? Technically speaking, US Treasury does not have authority to print paper currency, but they can actually mint coins. There is nothing in law and constitution that prevents you from making a coin, let's say, out of platinum, that is as big as this table and stamp $1 trillion on it. If U.S. Treasury ever did that, U.S. Mint has ever done that, they could take that big coin to Federal Reserve, deposit it into their account, and they would have $1 trillion in their bank account. So if U.S. wants to pay off all the national debt, they could pay it. Of course, that's going to produce huge inflation, but that's besides the point. So that means for each $10 million of protection that I sell, I'm going to get $20,000 a year. If I have the credit lines, I would do that. Let's see the value of that. And it went as high as 65. Why would anybody be willing to pay 65 basis points for that? What's special about that's May? If you guys are following the U.S. economy.
Is that when they got downgraded
by Fitch? But that downgrade happened later on. But there was the thing that kind of caused the downgrade. You guys may or may not know, in U.S. law, the U.S. Treasury cannot borrow, cannot have debt that is above a set limit. It's called the debt limit. That limit is determined by law, but as you have deficits, eventually you want to exceed it. So periodically that rate has increased or temporarily suspended. And Republicans do this quite a bit. Again, I'm a bleeding heart liberal. Obviously, I don't like him, but that was never an issue when Trump was running $1 trillion deficits a year before COVID. I can understand big deficits during COVID. That was a special time. In the last years of Obama, there was actually a surplus. Once the Trump came in, primarily because of higher military expenditures, B, he reduced all the taxes. By 2019, we had $1 trillion deficits. Of course, that needs to be financed. I mean, guess what happened? Guess what do you think Republicans did when that happened? Nothing. So expenditure is bad only if it's done by a Democrat. And similarly, for Democrats, tax cuts are bad as long as it's not done by a Democrat. It would have mattered. I would have sold those CDSs at 65. Unfortunately, I don't have ability to do that in something like what you want to call Robinhood. Maybe somebody should do an ETF that actually has the credit default swaps with some leverage. I would have shorted that big time. And you would have made a lot of money. He shorted something at 65, it's trading at 22 now. This is US, for God's sake. But let's look at, in the last 2 minutes, a country like Italy. It's a country that is famously a country run by coalitions of parties. Even now it's 87 basis points. And back in 2018, it was 273. Okay, they have perennial high debt and deficits, and it's very rare that they have a single party that controls the entire government. When you have coalitions, typically it's kind of saying you run that place, you run this place. That means your guys are gonna wet their beak, my guys are gonna wet their beak. It's not even just corruption. You know, you have a system of patronages, just like the old Roman times. And, you know, you're not gonna have fiscal discipline. Turkey had issues like that throughout 90s, and we had two big exchange rate crises. In 2002, primarily because of those crises, one party got the entire power. Until about 2012, there was stellar budget performance, economic stability, and growth. Not just because those guys were better, they just didn't have to share the bribes. When you don't have to share, you don't charge as much in bribes. You know, in countries like Turkey, India, Pakistan, bribes are cost of doing business. If you know what something is going to cost you in bribes, you can deal with that. There's actually an unofficial menu of bribes in India. If you want to get a permit of this is how much you need to pay to that official. But if you have 5 different parties controlling a government, and those parties change every 4 years, I'm not going to invest in long term as a foreign investor. So that sort of stuff affects the economies. Let's stop here. I'm going to do a little, not very little, a lecture on chapter 3, because we're going to use a lot of the concepts of balance of payments in the rest of the class. But when we come back, we're going to skip to chapter 5, right? The FX markets. Have a nice little break. I know.